Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 career mode playthrough, where we have just done a terrible and tragic thing to two of our astronauts, but we must move on, and we are doing just that. So, I have made some updates, and I have done just a little bit of research on figuring out what the heck went wrong on that mission. And there's two things. First, my design was bad. Like, based on my testing, if I had put the full amount of ablator on that Soyuz heat shield, things would have worked out fine because I would have been able to make that re-entry with no issue. Even though I had thought that I would not have been able to do that because of the heat shield not quite occluding the Gemini spacecraft. Apparently that's not an issue with the actual lifting re-entry profile that you would otherwise have used if you had enough ablator. But I used almost quadruple the amount of ablator on my test that I did, that I had packed on the original mission. So that is the kind of the original sin on that. So, and I've discovered the reason that I couldn't find the Gemini heat shield is because it's in mature capsules with Apollo. Sure, like I'm not sure I understand why that is the case. I guess the Apollo has not been quite redone yet because it still has the built-in ablator. It seems like they've been kind of going through a pass of changing things over from, I'm not sure, were they FASA? F-A-S-A? I'm not sure if they were FASA or if they were or what they were before, but they're being moved to Blue Dog Bureau, which is a lovely stock-alike, but in this sort of stock-alike, but very detailed and in the style of realistic rockets and obviously capsule pieces. But I think this is probably the FASA version. But in any case, I see that it has the heat shield still attached to it, and I don't see a separate heat shield anywhere. There's the big Gemini stuff. That's exciting. So yeah, I don't see anything named Apollo heat shield anywhere, so it may not exist. I know that the Gemini has a very specific size because it's a weird in-between size part, as opposed to the some of the other pods don't have that. That issue. But in any case, the reason why I didn't put a Lunar rated Gemini heat shield on there is because I did not have one and I did not realize that it existed. You'll notice that some of the colors on this are different because the RP-1 RSS folks have decided to take over Kerbal Construction Time, and this update has that built in, or the latest GitHub master that I grabbed has that built in, so that changes a little bit about how this stuff works. So those blue or teal boxes didn't really mean much to us over in the R&D, but here in the vehicle assembly building, you can see that they are all showing up. Everything that I have clicked the research button on to add to my research queue is available to me in the vehicle assembly building. How freaking cool is that? So that means I can actually plan on the new things and new unlocks and everything else. How freaking cool. So that's pretty darn amazing. I'm not sure about like new engine configs or anything like that, but you know, this is still miles better than what we had before. And you can click on hide experiments and that just makes them like not quite hidden and but not clickable. So I'm not sure if there's like a filter that knocks those out or what. But anyways, that's a really cool thing, and that is actually how I found out about the Lunar rated version of the heat shield, is because I went to my heat shields and it's like, oh, there it is, it's in green. What does that mean? And then I went and found out that it's because it requires mature capsules. So whatever. That's that, and I have a new mission that will hopefully get us back on track as far as the Gemini program, but we have some other things to do first. Ignition. And liftoff, the very slow liftoff indeed, of a quick little mission that we're going to do. This is a Tela Delta rocket with single RL variant of my Tela architecture using the oldest possible boosters. So yeah, we're sending this up, and this is a test satellite for a geostationary ComSat so that we can unlock the actual geostationary ComSat network. So let's just get through this, shall we? Oh no! Well, I guess never mind. Yeah, permanent shutdown on the H1 means that we have flipped completely out of control because I was time warping and was not able to do anything about that. And yeah, we are now a debris cloud. All right, here we have on the pad a Titan 3E that is bringing up our lunar returner payload into orbit, which will be going to the moon and coming on back. Ignition. And we have the cacophonous liftoff of the Titan 3E with those gigantic solid rocket boosters just picking us up and throwing us off of the pad. Fabulous. So yeah, we are on our way. This is basically a reflight of a mission that I already did, and it's one that I've done successfully, and so the whole thing works and whatever, but that was the one that I forgot to press record, so I get to do it again. But it's fine because there's actually a whole extra contract. It's one of those like semi-repeatable ones where you can do a lunar landing and sample return. I think I've done all my actual... Nope, I did not. I lied. I got one more lunar landing contract to do, and then the lunar landing and sample return, so we're going to get a good amount of money and science and everything else. Yeah, so this is flying using my Titan 3E architecture, which I just adore. I think it's just so damn fun. The gigantic solids are just a delight to use. They're heavy as hell, not particularly efficient, but the amount of delta V you get for the cost is fantastic, and that's really the usage for it. So I compare it to my Paladin 1 launcher. Like, my Paladin 1, I think is a little bit cheaper and is just like a little bit worse as far as its performance characteristics. Yeah, so my Paladin 1 gets about 16-ish tons to low Earth orbit, while the Titan 3E, my version of it, gets about 18 tons into low Earth orbit. And this cost me like a little bit more than 13,000 funds, while the Paladin 1 cost me a little bit less than 12. But it's at like an extra 300 tons, not that that matters terribly much. But the real difference is that a step up for my Paladin to go to the Paladin 2, which is a full-on like J2 8H1, like the full architecture, is like 21,000, and that gets me up to like 28 tons or so of into low Earth orbit. But this is such a great middle ground that it's able to do just a tremendous amount of work. All right, so I am firing up our LR-87 booster in preparation for separation of our solid rocket boosters and see them slowly separate away. And I dialed it into kicking them off about half a second early, because you can see that they're not really providing any thrust at that point. Any earlier than that, and they kind of like shoot off and do loop-de-loops, and that's not super great. And I was actually a little bit late on staging up our LR-87 that technically should go like between 5 and 10 seconds before you kick off those boosters, but also, I really don't think it matters all that much. Probably move this down here because we're probably going to get up to a point where we can knock off our fairings before we get to the next stage. So this Titan 3E is a fantastic kind of middle ground architecture in between the Paladin 1 and the Paladin 2. And it's a little bit more, like I said, more expensive than the Paladin 1, but it's able to just throw a little bit more as well. So it gets a decent increase on our performance without going to a whole gigantic new architecture. And I'm finding that building stuff with the what do you call it, with the new engines that I have. So with 8 H1s, like that is taking like a 6 meter stage, like a big chonker. Anything, well, I haven't tried anything bigger than that because I haven't quite unlocked my E1s yet, or my F1s, let alone. But those are coming soonish. So yeah, I can get a pretty big 6 meter stage on that. But anything that size with liquid hydrogen, like if I'm starting to use like any more than one J2 engine, and that ends up being just a humongous stage, like 10-20 meter long liquid hydrogen stage just to pack in all that fuel. So I really need to work on a tooling increase for the diameter of my spacecraft. But that's going to be something that I'm going to wait on a little bit until we get another level of our technology. So we have material science coming in just 30 days. So I'm not going to be doing any stressing about lunar exploration vehicles until I have the right material science to build, because that's going to give us new integral tanks, which is what I want to do most of my stuff with. Balloons are fantastic, but when we are making things this absolutely gigantically heavy and large, we really need to back off a little bit and do integral, because that saves us a humongous amount of money at these size ranges, I'm finding. Up until now, I've basically been using balloons for everything just because it's fine. Like, this is a balloon, and this is a balloon, and yeah, I've been using those because it's just not that big of a deal. Like, it, oh, didn't like that. Oh dear. Okay, thankfully that was fine. Man, I just remembered that, you know, changing the staging while you're using PVG is an absolute terrible idea. Don't do that. That's a bad thing. But thankfully it didn't back up. I'm pretty sure this thing has to deal with ullage. I think I just got really lucky there. So, anyways, I have no idea what I was saying now. So yeah, at these size ranges, it's just not that big of a deal to use balloon tanks. It's just not so much more expensive that it really changes how long it takes to build stuff, and that's really what's important. Is the build time obviously is a function of the cost, and so long as that doesn't get too high, then you don't really need to worry about it. And the difference between balloon tanks and integrals at like 3 meters and below is not that big of a deal. But now that I'm getting to like these big 5 meter, 6 meter tanks, it's like, okay, I really need to start shrinking stuff, or not shrinking stuff, but using more robust materials that are less expensive at those size ranges. So that's what we'll be seeing as we move forward. When I finally do build and tool my Paladin 2, I've basically been like, my Paladin 2 is built, like I have a craft file for it, but I don't have, what do you call it? I haven't like tooled it and saved it and like, or I have saved it, but I haven't tooled it and like actually finalized its design because it keeps changing. Like, since I first put the craft file together, I've had to update the second stage engine, I had to update the upper stage engines, and I'm going to end up changing out the way that the changing out the tank material type as well. So yeah, no real reason to tool it until you're actually sure you're going to use the darn thing. Alright, so we've got a long time. Let's reset guidance, because this thing clearly has no idea what it's doing. And that's my fault for adjusting the staging. There we go. Now we've flipped around a little bit, and we seem to be on the right track. It said something like 218 second burn with this stage that only has 50 seconds left, so that probably means that it had some garbage data from my adjusting the staging. But yeah, so we are just about there. And okay, a couple seconds until second stage burnout, and we light up our RL10 engines, which I'm fairly certain I upgraded to the, yep, I think that's the A-3-3, which is just a marginal improvement, but it gives you about an 11 more specific impulse, and that is always, always, always a good thing. Yeah, so we are on our way, and the nice thing about this design is that it gets us into orbit with just a ton of delta V left. Now, I am 100% certain that you could build a more efficient transfer stage that brings your spacecraft out to the moon. But I already have this big chunker that I've been using for deep space stuff. Like, this is pretty similar to, like, my Centaur has been something that I've used for everything. And one of the things that I did was I designed it to be used as the trans stage for my Gemini mission, as we fatefully found out not too long ago. And so one of the things that I did to do that was I put the extra RCS on there, and I also gave it deep space avionics. And so that's what we've done here. Like, this has deep space avionics, should hopefully. Yep, there we go. Which is going to allow us to do maneuvers around the moon. So I have enough fuel on this thing to do both the translunar injection and also braking at the moon. And I'll also have like an extra 1,000 meters per second of delta V. So let's just do that. Like, I don't see any reason to complicate it by adding more and more engines into the mix, or like putting a tiny like 1 RL10 stage on top of here that I throw. Like, I don't know. There's probably better ways and reasons to do that and have more smaller stages and more dedicated stages. But this seems to work, so we're going to do it. So I'm focus targeting the moon. And we are going to bring open the maneuver planner, and let's see what an intercept would look like. It looks like we are going to be landing on the dark side of the moon. That's less than great. But there's enough we'll be able to see with the ambient lighting. That's not that big of a deal. Let's turn on impact or landing location, and let's see. Mare Serenitatis. I don't think I've actually landed there before, in the Sea of Serenity. Nope. So yeah, let's plan for landing here. That seems like a nice location. Unfortunately, it is going to be dark, but like I said, we have the ambient lighting on, so we should be able to see the ground and the spacecraft itself, even if we won't have the really pretty lighting from the sun. It's just, I've had to delay this mission a couple times because of things that I've forgotten or messed up. So there's been a couple rollbacks already. My original launch time was perfectly in the sun, but so it goes. All right, so we are coming around to our translunar injection burn that is going to bring us closer to the moon. Hopefully we will be able to find Mare Serenitatis after we correct this burn, because it never works out the very first time. And we have a good ignition on our RL10 engines, which are getting pretty darn reliable, thankfully. We've been putting a lot of data on them, and we are getting very close to having that maxed out. That's going to probably get reduced a few times as we change configurations, because we have a couple more config upgrades to go as we move through Hydrolox rocketry technology nodes, but we are pretty close to having this as reliable as it's going to get, which is pretty darn exciting, because I absolutely love these. Like, I don't know how you argue with 433 specific impulse. I just don't understand how you do it. That's just so incredibly crazy high that even the difficulties of using liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen are just like piddly in comparison to how wildly efficient that is compared to any other, not any other, but to the other available technology or fuels that I have, and engines and so forth. So that's just fantastic, and I love it. But we are using that to get on our way. We are pretty close to the end of this burn, and then we will do our correction and make sure that we are all settled up. And cut off there. That was pretty darn good. Let's point ourselves prograde so that we can do our final adjustments. It actually looks like we are perfectly set up. This is great. Wow, I could not have asked for any better. So what we're going to do at this point is we are going to point ourselves down towards the sun. Because what I'd like to do is point ourselves... I don't actually have the solar panels on here, but I should have the battery and the ability to turn off our avionics, so that's not a big deal. But we do want to point so that we are... actually, probably... No, this seems right. Because we have solar panels on our lander craft. There we go. So we're going to have that open, and as we warp around, We are pointing into the sun, getting some power back. Perpetual electric charge, and we are losing some of our liquid hydrogen, but hopefully that's not going to diminish too quickly. All right, we have arrived near the moon, so we are still pointing up there, and yeah, it's going to be a nice dark landing, which is pretty darn unfortunate. We're gonna have to be very careful with how much power and so forth we use. All right, so now that we have entered the sphere of influence of the moon, let's activate our science experiments on our lander. There's still a little bit of science to be done up here in orbit. We have cameras and so forth aplenty. So one thing that I discovered that I was told, not that I discovered it on my own, but was that the way that the Kerbalism experiments work with the higher tiers is the included experiment thing, means that when you finish a higher tier experiment, so if I were to finish, for example, Magnetic Scan 2, and I did not have Magnetic Scan 1 finished or done at all, I would get credit for both. Right? So that seems to be how that works, and that sounds fantastic to me. That means I can not pack the lower level experiments ever again, not on board the little core and not on board anything. I can just do the higher level experiments, and I will be trying and testing that, and actually I could probably do that as soon as this mission here. Give it a shot with the my helium magnetometer here and make sure that that works the way that I expect it to. I'm going to turn this magnetic scan off, and yeah, so we will see about that, and hopefully that works the way that I hope it does. All right, so we're coming down, and this mission works a little bit like Luna 16, which was a Soviet mission, and the first lunar sample return mission that anyone ever flew, or completed successfully, I should say. But it has a lot of the same basic elements of that this mission does. So as we get a little bit closer, I'm just kind of keeping an eye on our suicide burn because we want to be pointed at the sun for as long as possible to make sure that we have a full load of power before I separate everything and start angling ourselves for our descent. All right, we are getting down to just about 1 hour until our suicide burn. I am just soaking up the last bits of the sun here and keeping our avionics off as long as possible. I've found that in this particular mission profile, I have not had too much trouble with the what do you call it? I have not had too much trouble with the capability of this spacecraft to stop. Like, it's actually a super generous extra amount of delta V that we have, so I don't have any issues with that. But yeah, now that the sun is out of the way, but Earth is still here watching us, we can point ourselves in the direction that we are going to be cutting off here. So I can reach down and put right there. We're just going to slow down by about 2,400 meters per second or so. Point ourselves at the node, and that is what our final attitude is going to need to be for this landing. All right, so 22 minutes to go. Let's time warp just a little bit more, and then I'll talk more about Luna 16. Just turning up the ambient light intensity a little bit since I did doom us to a nighttime landing. Time to impact. 8 minutes. 7 minutes until our burn begins. It's incredibly spooky because you cannot see anything at all until we get down low enough that the ground shaders start kicking in. Okay, 1 minute to suicide burn. That seems good enough for me. I'm going to point ourselves at our node and just start preparing. We are going to... Okay, that was actually pretty easy. So yeah, Luna 16, one of those milestones that the Soviets kind of grabbed out ahead of us. But it was basically a very similar spacecraft to what we have here, where it had a landing stage and then a ascent stage that was kind of stacked right up on top of it. in the kind of familiar model that we're all pretty well used to. We're all kind of flying in that same model. And I'm just like, every so often, there we go. There's the shaders allowing us to see finally. I'm just kind of running our jets slightly to make sure that we have our ullage is correct, and I can light up these engines now. Beautiful. There we go. So we have the engines lit, and we are coming down, braking above the surface of the moon. And like I said, we are going to have about 1,000 meters per second of extra delta V, which means this is an over-provision mission, but also whatever. I wasn't able to launch this with anything terribly cheaper, although I probably could have done it with a Paladin 1. But also, yeah, I like being able to do everything all together. So, yeah, so it was a descent stage that had, I only have 3 legs, and the Luna 16 had 4, but it was a little landing legs, fuel tanks. It had radar and a dual descent engine complex, which just means that it had a couple engines that it used to descend, and then it had just one on top that it used to lift off once again. But yeah, it acted in kind of the same way, where it had a whole base that had all of its required science experiments and everything else. It actually did have a little scooper and an automated system that brought soil samples up into the return capsule, which was a very tiny affair. It got a very, very small amount of lunar regolith returned back to Earth. We are going to get a dramatically larger amount comparatively, I think. I don't remember if it was like 80 grams or if it was like actual kilograms, but I cannot remember. We'll see soon enough. But yeah, it was for the Soviet craft, the Luna 16, it was a very, very tiny amount indeed. Okay, so we are just about out of horizontal speed. And once that is gone, I'm going to cut the engine, and then the RL-10s are going to fling us all over the place. All right, so with the burn complete to break above the surface, we are still a little bit less than 10 kilometers up and descending down pretty rapidly. And if I were to release now, we would probably be okay burning with the engines that I have, but I would also rather just use up as much of this fuel as I can because it has much higher thrust to weight ratio than the little landing engines that I'm using on our descent stage. So I'm going to not quite do the suicide burn here. I'm just going to get a little bit closer to that so that I can very carefully remove as much of our surface velocity as possible, as close as I possibly can to the surface. So we are going to fire this up in just a couple seconds. We're ready to go. We're about 2 kilometers up. That seems fine. Let's go ahead and cut our velocity. All right, big RL-10s, removing all that surface thrust, and before it throws us completely out of whack, I'm going to kill rotation, and I'm going to separate our upper stage here. There we go. Activate these avionics, and we should be all set. Surface velocity minus. Fire up the engines. We're a little bit late on the suicide burn countdown according to this, and we are going a little fast, so we can fire up our ascent engine, which will help make sure that we have enough thrust. Put down the landing legs, and what the heck? I don't understand why they snapped like that. That's not great. But whatever. I guess we're going to try very carefully land on the engine bell. All right, we are 60 meters above the surface. A little bit hard with no sunlight, but we'll do our best. Get it down to about 1 meter, and nothing even exploded on the dang Centaur. All right. 3 meters per second. I'm just removing this last single meter of... And there we go. Perfect landing on the engine bell. Hate that I had to land there, but it is what it is. These legs just did not do it for me. Perfect. So we have done it. We have landed on the surface of the moon with our Lunar Returner spacecraft. Fantastic. So just like Luna 16, we are now going to do some automated science. It was a little bit lighter than the spacecraft, or a little bit heavier actually than the spacecraft that we have landed here. So we're doing things a little bit more efficiently, which sounds about right when we're talking about Soviet engineering. I would like to do all the science at this point. However, I don't think we have the battery to do all the science in the darkness, and it's going to be a little while before we get sunlight. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, the sunrise should be coming this way, so it shouldn't be too terribly long until we actually have sunlight. So I think we need to go into kind of a safe mode and shut down all of our science experiments that we have running to give us as much power as we can, as well as to turn off the avionics, and that gives us 10 whole days of battery power just sitting here and communicating back home to Earth. Let's see, do I have anything else coming up? Nothing anytime soon. We've got a geosat test going to be finished in about 3 days. So we're going to want to get that rolled out to the pad. Let's just see what this kind of looks like here. Yeah, as we are rotating around, you can see that the sunrise is approaching and will hopefully be here before our batteries die completely. And then we will be able to, I think, we'll still, just right here, at the Terminator, we should have just enough sunlight to do our experiments, and then we will be able to launch and return and still hopefully have signal. So that is what I'm going to bank on. So I'm going to go handle our next launch, and then we'll come back to this. But so far, this has been a very successful landing. We will do a little more discussion of the science experiments on this craft and also on the Luna 16 when we get back to it. Three, two, one, ignition. And we have liftoff of a Delta rocket, which is bringing up a geostationary test payload to begin testing out our the contracts we need to get the geostationary satellite network up and running. And so there's not a whole lot to this one that we haven't seen a bunch of times. I'm pretty sure I've flown this Delta model before. This is basically, it's my regular old like my old Tele variants with the H1 side boosters and the LR-105 main core there, but it is a single RL-10 upper stage, and that is what is going to bring this payload up to geostationary altitude. And it doesn't need to be all that precise or all that capable at that altitude. Ooh, that is on. My MLI is on fire. Did I have MLI in here? I probably should. Oh no! Come on! It happened again! It happened again! Oh my gosh! That is the second time I have flown this exact mission with this exact payload, and that is the second time that it has failed because one of the H1s has gone out. Oh, for God's sake. Okay, apparently I need to just use a different rocket because that H1 is cursed. Alright. Well, pick off that fairing and we can just, here's the avionics. Range safety. Alright, mission failed again. We'll get them next time. All right, gosh darn it. So we're back at the Lunar Returner, and we just need to wait until we have sunlight. One thing that I need to start working on after this is pretty much as soon as possible, I need to start building out my Venus transfer vehicle. I just said that because it said Venus transfer right on there. But I'm building a new lander for Venus, and I've found a transfer window that actually works for what do you call it? For getting us to a a good capture and landing ahead of that contract. So I'm going to try with everything that I have now to build something that will work. There is also supposed to be a transfer window at the end of this year, because it is coming up on 1973. But at the end of this year, in real life, we sent out the Mariner 10 mission, which slung shot past Venus to get into a nice close flyby of Mercury. So that is a really cool thing, and I've been wanting to do a gravitational assist flyby for a really long time, but it's also really hard to do. So I'm hoping that that is something that I will be able to pull off, but we will see. So that's something that's supposed to be at the end of 1973 in real life with real orbital mechanics. So I will have to do some looking around to see what that looks like if I were to do that with our patched Conics universe. And there we go, sunrise on the moon. Now we should start getting just a little trickle of power, but really it should be enough to start doing all of our experiments. So let's go ahead and get that moving, because this is only going to get better over time. So we can turn on data transmission. Pressure scan, magnetic scan 2, so we're going to kick out our helium magnetometer boom once again. Mass spectrometry 2, telemetry analysis, visible imaging 2, temperature scan. So yeah, you'll notice that I'm doing all of the level 2 versions because I want to see if that actually works and if it works right away, so that we can tell if we need to pack the lower level experiments ever again, because I have it on pretty good authority that that is how that works, but it's always good to test things out to see exactly what you need to be doing. So this should, in theory, stay here for 30 days, and I don't have, since we're just coming into the sun, I should be able to get at least most of that, I think. Although, yeah, we should be able to get most of that here and get a lot of this research done ahead of time. So I might be able to just like leave this up here and then do the return in a little bit once the science is finished. But one thing that we want to get going is we want to get the surface sample started. So let's go ahead and reach out with a little scoop and get a little dip of that regolith right there. And perfect, that went great. Even though it isn't awesome that it is sitting on its engine bell and not on the darn landing legs. So yeah, now that is collecting that surface sample. So this 5 minutes represents the time that it took for this thing to go scoop and find the sample, collect it, make sure that it was collected, and then use the complicated system of pulleys and conveyors that is going to bring it up into the avionics return capsule up on top. So the Luna 16 version of this was a little bit more simple and direct, and obviously less abstract. So what they did is after they landed, they broke out a drill that they just used to penetrate the surface of the moon, dig in to get a soil sample, and then they stopped at about 35 centimeters in depth. And then it just took the sample out, like connected to the drill on like, I guess, a little basket or something that was attached to that. So like probably had like a screw, the screw head action that drew the soil up into a little, not container, but a little scoop or something, that it was then able to like use a swing arm to reach over its head and dump it directly into the top of the spacecraft. So it put it into the little, basically put it into the little hemisphere up here that it was able to dump on top. And then after just 26 hours on the lunar surface, the Luna 16 took off and went back home. And we're not going to leave that soon, but I'm not sure that we're going to stay the entire 30 days. I guess we'll see. That's a pretty valuable chunk of science, and I'm not too worried about the timing on that. So I guess we'll see. All right, contract complete for lunar landing. Fantastic, because we have landed safely on the moon and returned valuable science data from the surface. Yes, indeed. We have done this a bunch of times now, and we know that it is quite safe and quite possible to do. We are collecting all the other science, and you can see our KCT upgrade points just rolling on past, which is the real star of this show. And temperature scan and pressure scan are just about to completed. Sent that back. There does seem to be an atmosphere, but it's only 10 to the -7 pascals, which is just barely anything. Temperature scan completed. Fabulous. Visible imaging is going to be the first one that we can actually see the level 2 finish on. Let's fast forward till that's done. Oh, look at that. It finished Visible Imaging 1. It finished it before I even finished Visible Imaging 2. Yeah, so I think that there is like an abstract, and this is stopped, like clearly stopped, but now it's finished. So yeah, there's clearly an abstract version of the lower level experiments that are happening kind of invisibly in the background, such that you can't really see it happening, but because it's happening, we don't ever have to pack the lower level experiments again, which is just fantastic. I love that as a concept, and I love that is a thing. So very, very, very cool. I think we are going to indeed chance leaving this up here for 30 days. So I think that should be relatively safe, question mark. So I'm gonna stop time warping. And I'm going to throw down a timer for 30 days, 5 hours, and 10 minutes. That sounds fine. Lunar returner, we'll add that alarm. There we go. And that is when this is going to come back after it finishes gathering mass spectrometry and magnetic scan data from the surface of the moon. All right, so coming back, we have hundreds of science. We have a whole bunch more stuff. So we're going to just crank away at research and development. That is where I've been feeling lacking. So we are just going to push all our points into that. Fabulous. And that is indeed our 5th and final soft landing on the moon. So that's the last time we can do that contract. We're still in progress on this one. We have plenty of time before that expires, so I'm not too stressed about that. Plenty more good stuff to do in orbit of the moon. But I think that is going to have to do it for us today. Times be pretty crazy, so thanks for understanding about the shorter videos. If you like this one, please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I do love to hear from you all, and I will see you next time.